Hello everybody! Today I'm going to show you how I made my Barbie dress, so let's get started. After analyzing all of the reference photos I could, I discovered that the fabric was a 1-inch gingham fabric. I just bought 2 yards of this fabric off of Amazon. This polyester is a lot thicker than I was hoping for, but it worked. One thing I will note is that these squares are not a perfect 1-inch by 1-inch square. They are a little bit longer in the one direction, but you can still count up the squares and the inches per inches each frame of the video to get the measurements for this dress. I cut out two 32 by 24-inch rectangles, which I was able to figure out by counting out the squares. I then proceeded to take one of those rectangles and cut it in half down the middle. I also cut out a waistband and a waistband stiffening layer, which you can find the measurements by counting the squares. I then took that stiffening layer, which was literally just an old bed sheet that I cut up, and I put the outer part of the waistband on top of it, and I then flipped it over and sandwiched them. That way the lining was touching right sides to right sides on the inside, and the pink outer part was on both outside parts. I proceeded to sew the back panels onto the front panel by sewing up both of the side seams of the skirt. And I do ask that you please ignore any timeline discrepancies. This pleated skirt is actually the last thing I made out of this whole costume, but because it is such a simple, easy beginner project, I wanted it to show it first. You can measure, but the easiest thing that you can do is just to fold your waistband in half and find the center and pin it or mark it in a way so you can remember where it is. Once you've marked the waistband, you can then take your skirt, fold it in half and find the center, and then pin those two pieces together at each of their centers, right sides together. Now pin the very end of the left edge of the skirt to the left edge of the waistband, and do that for the right side as well. With all the extra fabric that you have in the middle there, you can just fold it in on itself, making pleats, pin it down, and then sew across the whole thing, and you can serge as well if you would like. I wish I had had more material to make my skirt because it would have been nice if it had been fuller, but it's okay with just 1 yard of fabric. Now you can serge off the edges, serge off the bottom, finish it however you like, and insert a zipper. Feel free to use whatever pattern you have or draft a completely new pattern if you like. I recommend any of these 3 patterns here for the bodice, and then they can be modified just slightly to work for this Barbie dress. Basically, anything that has kind of like a sweetheart neckline will work perfectly. I chose to use Simplicity 4070. I'm not sure if this one's still in print, but again, anything with a sweetheart neckline should work decently for this project. I started by laying out my sheet, doubling it over, putting any pattern pieces that needed to be on a folded edge onto a folded edge, and then I cut everything out on my self-healing cutting mat something with my rotary cutter. You can always just do this with scissors as well. It's a total preference. This is also a good time to modify anything if you need to. This next step is totally optional. Depending on your machine, it is going to look different, and if you're hand sewing, well, disregard this completely, I suppose. Anyway, change the length on your machine to the longest stitch length or a gathering stitch so you can get these nice big loose stitches. I then sewed up my lining pieces together to make sure there weren't any fit issues. Everything was looking fine. I needed to add that little dip down in the front of the bodice, which you will see I never actually ended up doing, unfortunately. And I also discovered that I was going to have to add just a bit more fabric to the back so that the zipper wasn't too tight on the lower part of the bodice. So I went back to the bed sheet, which, as you have probably figured out by now, I am using as the lining for this dress, and I cut out 2 more back pieces with my rotary cutter with just a little bit more fabric for the back piece. And here's where those loose gathering stitches are going to come in handy. Now I'm going to pull on those threads. They're going to slip right out of the fabric, and it's going to detach the pieces from each other so that I can then lay these out onto my pink gingham fabric and use them as pattern pieces for the outer part of the bodice as well. I also put pins into each of the bodice pieces to signify what was what so that I wouldn't get mixed up on anything and I could keep everything straight. Again, this is totally optional. If you're using a pattern that you know already fits you, there's no need to go through this extra step. Now it was time to put these pieces on top of the pink picnic fabric and lay everything out. I did take special care of lining up the stripes, that way they would be centered front, and then for all the left side pieces and then all of the right side pieces, I made sure to line everything up so that the opposite sides were symmetrical. I was able to do this by folding the fabric in half along the middle edge of one of the stripes and then lining all of the squares up. You do not have to do this at all. I was pretty much just fiddly when it came to the bodice, and I didn't worry too much about anything else. I then pinned right sides to right sides for the lining, right sides to right sides for the bodice, sewed everything together, and tried it on. At this point, the outer layer and the lining layer are completely separate. You can see the little modification I made. It's all cute. So right now I'm over at my serger. I am going to go ahead and serge the lining and the outer layer of this just because I am a little bit worried about the frayability. I am going to have everything fully lined, but I just want to make sure that nothing's falling apart in the washing machine. I'm going to run some scraps through my machine so I can get the tension correct, and then I'm going to do it on the actual bodice pieces. It turns out that my serger is actually cooperating today. Everything's serged real nicely. I don't really have any puckers, pulls. This one's a little loose and lettucey, but not bad at all. So we're just gonna get started on the actual thing. This step is not necessary, and if you do not have a serger but you would still like to finish off your raw edges, you can use a basic zigzag stitch on a regular sewing machine. I don't use my serger enough as it is, and I'm trying to get more use out of it, and I also want this dress to be fine in the washing machine, so yeah. This next step is optional as well, but I am a strong believer in top stitching. This side has not been top stitched. This side has. It looks so much nicer. Top stitching is so easy, and it really just adds that wonderful finishing touch. 10 out of 10 recommend. At this point I was getting a little low on thread, but I had these two other thrifted threads. Don't know what they are, but they look close enough. Now that I have the whole thread situation sorted out, we can move on to the spaghetti straps. By taking a quick peek at this reference photo, I was able to figure out that the straps are cut on the bias because there aren't perfect little lines going down the straps, but the squares are instead at an angle. I also know this to be correct because spaghetti straps are always cut on the bias. I cut out 4 pieces that looked like this piece on the right side, and then I folded it in half like this piece on the left side, and I sewed down with an angle at one end. You can do a very, very small seam allowance when you're doing this because we're also going to go in, clip the corner, and then shave down that seam so that it's easier to flip and there's not as much bulk in the strap. I chose to use pinking shears to cut down on fraying, but as you'll see in a moment, we are going to top stitch again because I love top stitching, and that will help hold everything in place so that nothing frays and falls apart. I did end up using a turning tool, which I highly recommend. They're not very expensive, but if you don't have one, there are other methods out there that I think you could find very easily on the internet. For this next step, you can use a pokey pencil or a chopstick. Just make sure you don't push too far into the material. Once your strap is flipped, you're going to want to shove something in there and kind of poke out the corners so that they poke out nice and straight. Again, you do not need to have pinking shears because we are top stitching these spaghetti straps. You are welcome to top stitch the left and right side if you'd like, totally up to you. It looks so cute. And now it is once again time to grab your bodice. We want wrong side on the table, right side facing up, and we're going to attach both of our front straps onto the left and right front seam lines. Feel free to turn your bodice around, kind of put the left and right side in the center back so you can get a better idea for how the straps are going to lay. And now you can attach right side to right sides with those back straps as well. These may just line up with your seams and then easy peasy. This next step isn't necessary, but it is a great step if you don't want to potentially accidentally probably make mistakes. This is a really quick and easy step, and it could potentially save you the time of having to seam rip if you accidentally sew one of the spaghetti straps down somewhere where you don't. Basically just take your straps, fold them over, pin them down so that they don't get in the way of our top bodice seam. Now you can take the right side of your pink bodice still facing up, and then the right side of your lining bodice facing down, right side to right side, and match up all of the seams and pin everything together. Of course, you could just bring this over to the machine without pins and sew along the top of the bodice neckline, but I do find that the pins help things from shifting around and they make everything look nice and neat. So now we're just going to sew along this whole top, and then we'll flip everything. You're welcome to understitch or top stitch. I'll probably be doing at least one, probably both, just to make sure it looks nice, and then I might even be serging it. So let's do it. Now go ahead and lay your top out flat and measure it. This should be the same measurement as your waist, but we just want to make sure that everything's going to line up anyway. And measuring a second time isn't a bad thing. I have my fabric folded in on itself, and then I kind of cut out this little bit of an A-line shape, and I unfolded my fabric. I actually have both pieces here, the front and the back. I also cut out 2 lining pieces because I plan on putting the little scallops on the edge of the skirt. If you don't want to make the scallops, then you can skip this step. Then you're going to cut the back pieces straight down the middle, and then you can sew the sides up on both of those skirts while keeping that back still open. Now you're going to do wrong side to the carpet, right side up for the pink gingham, and then you're going to put the right side down, wrong side to the sky for the lining material, and you're going to lay them right side to right side. Once you have your right sides to right sides, you can take some pins and pin along the whole hem, but you want to do this about 3 to 4 inches away from the actual natural hemline of the skirt. Now you can either fold your skirt in half or use a measuring tape. You're going to find the center front of the skirt and place a can or a cup or just something that's kind of round right there. A coaster would work fine, or an actual template if you have one. Make your first scallop, and then from there you can start making the scallops to the left and the right. This just ensures that our first scallop is front and center. You do not have to do this on both skirts. You could just do this on the lining, or you could do this on the gingham, whichever you want to do. I do recommend the lining though, just in case you have some leakage. I also wouldn't recommend a Sharpie or anything. I did use a water soluble pen, but you don't have to. I think a regular pen or pencil would work just fine. Now you're going to sew right side to right side of the skirts, following that scalloped line that you made with your pen. I think this would have been easier with a free motion foot, but it is totally possible with a regular sewing machine foot, and I know that not everyone has a quilting foot, so I just wanted to show this way. Now that we have all of the scallops sewn, we can go ahead and take the pins out, and then I'll show you how to cut and clip all the edges. You can already see through the scalloped edges, so now I'm going to give you a better angle so you can see what's going on a bit better. Okay, so the reason that we are cutting and sewing the way we are is because it's going to make it a lot easier. If we had cut out the scallops beforehand and then tried to sew around, it'd be very, very difficult. I've gone in with my pinking shears. They have these little triangles, and I've cut, you could just cut with the regular scissors too, and then in each of these little scallop points, I've put in a cut. If you're just using regular scissors, you might need to go ahead and snip along the curves as well, so they're able to fold in. I have some more scallops here. You can actually see them finally, and I'm just going to cut those out again with my scissors. I'm getting pretty close, but I'm not cutting the thread. Now that the scallops are cut, I can go in with my little stork scissors, and I'm just going to cut each of these almost all the way up to the thread, but not cutting the thread. It's a bit thicker because it's on a seam. Okay, there we go. Cut this one, and this one, and this one. Okay, I'm going to show you, if you are just using a regular scissors, how to clip a curve. It just helps it fold and bend in on itself better when we flip it right sides out. So you're just going to go, these aren't the best scissors for this, but they're precise, but then don't cut fabric very well. So you'll just go in and cut like that until you have a bunch of little notches. That way when it's folded the other way, the fabric is easily able to bend in on itself. Now you can flip the skirt inside out. You can see how the notches are helping things to turn a little bit better. Still not going to lay completely flat though, so we are going to top stitch, and it looks beautiful. And now the skirt is pretty much almost complete, and we are going to be able to attach it to the dress. I did serge the bottom part of the bodice and then that top part of the skirt that they'd have finished edges, and then I just sewed them right sides together, but you could do this with whatever method you prefer. At this point, everything was enclosed. It was either lined or overlocked and hidden inside, except for the left and the right side backs. So I serged down both of those sides, and then I inserted a zipper to the left and right sides to close up the back. And once I had inserted the zipper, I still had a few inches at the bottom, so I just put right sides to right sides and sewed it up, and then the dress was complete. Alright everybody, here's a quick, although not completely thorough, tutorial on how I made the bows. Start out by cutting these shapes and then folding that rectangle in half and sewing all the way around, making sure to leave an opening on the one side right here so we can flip it inside out. Clip the curves, flip it, and then top stitch everything down. You're also going to flip this in half, turn it out as a tube, do the same thing for the little taily thingies. Scrunch up the bow, put this little thingy on top so the bow looks prettier when it's scrunched up, and then we are going to add in the tails. Then you can proceed to hand sew this all together using a little alligator clip or one of these bigger clips. I'm not sure what they're called though, and bam, you have a bow. For the one that goes on the dress, you can just use a safety pin. Alright everybody, so this is it. I'm going to show you all of the pieces and then I'll show you them on. I did think about adding this clip onto the skirt for like the long dress version, but it's not quite big enough and it just looks kind of silly, so I'm not going to do that. It's just from the Dollar Tree. Alrighty, so here's the hair bow. Has this really awesome clip on the back to keep it in your hair. There we go. I did end up threading the back with black thread to keep the clip on. That way if I ever need to remove the clip, I don't accidentally trim some of the pink thread that goes onto the bow itself. And then here we have the sundress. Of course, it's a bit longer than the original one, and I did not get as much of a swoop in the front as I was wanting, but it's not that big of a deal. I kind of wish I had used that frozen pattern. It would have brought in the front center panel a bit more and given it this look that's in the original, but again, I love it. It's still mine. It's still recognizable. Like, it's Barbie's beach dress. If you look here and here, you can actually see that this dress has 2 darts on each side and that there aren't separate pieces making the sweetheart bodice. I did not do the little romper thing in the back. As you can see from these pictures, it's a circle skirt because the plaid is laying straight up and down in the front, but then when it gets to the back, it's on the angle or the bias. And then there's like the smaller checker material underneath that makes the little shorts. But again, I didn't do that. I don't have a smaller checker material to make the the shorts. And even if I had made out of this material, I just barely scraped by. I didn't really have enough. But it's almost like for the original that you put on shorts and then you put on like the top that then closes down the back with that heart backing, and then the little skirt goes out so that the pants can peep through. So I think at the front almost goes on like an apron and then closes up the back. But I really like this like mini dress version. I think it turned out really cute. And then to go over that, I didn't really have quite enough fabric to make a huge fluffy like 50s housewife skirt, but like it's big enough. I like it. Again, I'll show you this on in just a moment. I wish I had had more yardage. I think 2 yards would have been good instead of just 1 yard, because then I could have added more pleats. It looks fine though. Should probably add hook and eyes to both of these as a zipper down the back. That's the skirt. I didn't end up hemming it actually. I just ended up serging the end. That way I could keep the extra length. It looks really cute over the dress. It has this thicker waistband, which I thought was more comfortable, and it hides the bow underneath. But the bow on the mini dress or beach dress can be taken off. I just have it on there with a safety pin. That way it's not like permanent or anything, and it can be washed in the washer without messing up the bow. But this can be like folded down when you're wearing it, either to the inside or the outside, to have a smaller waistband. So you can have a small one or a big one. And when you have the small one, it's like the exact same length as the one in the Barbie movie. What's really cool is that I was actually able to count the inches based off of her dress a lot of the time. And then use that to help measure with things on my side of it, even though my body's proportions are a bit different, and try and focus on that too much. So I have to say, overall, I'm glad that I made it the way I did. I would love to make this dress again someday, but like, it's good. I love it. It's so cute. I kind of wish I had just made the long dress first and not even worried about the beach romper underneath, but like, it looks so cute, and I think I actually like the short mini dress beach romper skirt dress thing even more, which is surprising because I'm usually more of like a spinny long skirt kind of girl. I also made this bow a bit bigger than the one in the movie because I just love big bows.